similar stats to other students, they're not getting 9 interview invitations. Mission Accepted Season 3. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am outstanding. I'm excited to be talking to you. Number one, because we go way back for you as a former Application Academy student and now an Application Academy TA. I'm excited to have you on to take a peek at your application and see what made you successful during your application cycle. Sound good?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
So let's get some nuts and bolts. What did your application cycle look like? Number of interviews, number of acceptances, first application cycle, second application cycle. Give us the nuts and bolts.
So this was the first time applying to medical school. I think I got 9 interview invites. I ended up going to 4, and then I got 3 acceptances from those 4 interviews, and I was happy with that. So
if there could be any difference, I don't think I've asked this question before, if there could be any change in your application cycle to be more successful, what do you think that would have been?
I would have maybe gotten on my secondaries a little bit more, gotten those in a little bit earlier. I mean, if I could bump my MCAT up a couple points, would have done that too, but he wouldn't. But overall, yeah, I guess I could have been a little bit more on the ball with my secondaries.
Okay. And between MD and DO, where were the interviews at?
I had 1 MD and then the rest were DO, so ADO.
What do you think led to your success?
Looking over my application, I think I just painted a good picture for them of who I was as a person and where my priorities were and what really motivated me within the past 4 years to apply to medical school and want to become a doctor. And I think my hope was I came across genuine and that I was truly speaking from what I was passionate about and not so much what I thought the perfect applicant looked like. And that's some feedback I got, and also was one of my goals when writing my application.
Yeah. And that's a big part of Application Academy, right? It's trying to help you figure out the best part of your story to tell, and not here's the cookie cutter way of saying the exact way to say that you're determined to be a doctor. These are the key words. Just tell us just who you are as a person.
Yeah. And I truly believe my application would have looked totally different if it weren't for Application Academy. Not promoting this or anything, but I am promoting it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's take a look at your application, and we'll see what went right. We'll see what went wrong, and see what led you to get that many interview invites. That's awesome. All right. So taking a look at your application, the first thing I always love pointing out is that early submission date. So you submitted early, which is wonderful. How did you again, kind of coming off track a little bit here, the goal of submitting early is often kind of forgotten in this process of I need my personal statement to be exact. I need this to be perfect. I need that to be perfect. When you look at getting your application in June 1st, that's early. That's within a couple days of the application cycle opening up. Why were you determined to get your application in so early, and what do you think led to you being able to do that?
I started thinking about writing my application in January. So I think it took me probably 3 months to actually get my personal statement to where I was really confident with it. But by that time, it was end of March. I still had time to work on my activities. And I got to a point with my personal statement where I just let it go. I was I think this is where it needs to be. I could read it and switch a couple words, edit a little bit of grammar, but I just eventually got to the point where I was I got to stop toying with this. So end of March, I stopped toying with it, started working on my activities, got those to where I wanted them to be. And just, I knew from hearing other people talk that it is time is a big thing in the application cycle. So, and I knew my MCAT score wasn't going to be the most competitive. And so I wanted to be in the first wave that they saw.
Yeah. 3 months. Did everyone hear that? 3 months to get that personal statement where you want it to be. And then you were still tweaking with it. One of my favorite quotes, I don't know if you heard me say it before, is great art is never done. It just stops in interesting places. So looking at more of your application here, you can see that as we get in here, you have this SES disadvantage, which is kind of pre-marked based on parent, education, and job. You did not mark yourself as disadvantaged, and then no big red flags there. No military service for you. All right, and then we get down into some high school dual enrollment credits. Thank God you didn't ruin GPA with bad high school classes from college, which always seems to be an issue. But you didn't let that stop you. You have one withdrawal here. Did your withdrawal come up at all in any of your interviews?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I
Shocker.
was I was a little worried about that, but no, it didn't. It never came up.
Never came up. Shocker. And then you have a bunch of future classes on here. So you were a traditional student applying, it looks like.
I was. I went straight from. I graduated in May, started in July, medical school.
Awesome. So that's a little bit different for a lot of what we show here on the medical school headquarters and mission accepted stuff is we get a lot of non-trad. So being able to see a traditional student is a breath of fresh air. So you can see how all of your future classes are added there without grades. And then when we look at your grades are awesome. So 391 total, 387 science GPA with 71 credits already taken. And then a lot of these that you have here are more science classes. So the assumption would be you're going to continue to do well. And then it transitions over into this 504. What happened here?
I didn't know how to study for it, and I toyed with it for months and months. And I don't think it wasn't that I gave myself enough time, because I started in January and took the test in June.
Yep.
And I never got it. The amount of time I was putting in was not aligning with the results. And that was really frustrating for me. But I took it, and that's the score I got, and I didn't want to do it again. So
let's look at this timing here. So you submitted June 1st, 2021. You took the test June 18th, 2021. So very common recommendation, at least from me, is go ahead and submit your application, submit it to one school, wait till you get your score back, and you can add more schools later. Is that what you ended up doing, was just submit to one school, or you were like, screw it, I'm just going for it?
I went all in. I submitted to all of them. I submitted to all of them.
Okay. All right. That works.
If I could go back in time, I would have been more realistic with myself. Honestly, because that was what I was getting on the practice exams.
Okay.
It's not like that was a drop or a surprise to me. I knew that was coming.
You knew it going in.
But I was like, well, maybe I got a couple points higher. It's like, no. Should have been more realistic with myself. But
yeah, in Application Academy, we talk a lot about MCAT prep getting in the way of application prep getting in the way of MCAT prep. Did you find that to be true, where you're like working for 3 months on your personal statement, and in the side you're like, well, I got to study for the MCAT, and you're like, which one takes priority? I found myself prioritizing the application writing, because I enjoyed that more, I guess. And I was also taking, I was a full-time college student as well. So I had that to juggle, and I was working and MCAT prep, and it was just so much. And MCAT prep was just like, and it should not be, but that's how. Well, that's the right there. 504 gives you the and that's the struggle. So one more question about MCAT before we move on. Why a June MCAT? Right, ideal situation, kind of January to March, maybe April of the year that you're going to apply. You took it in June. What was that thought process for taking it later?
That was the semester that I could have taken the least amount of credits. So that's the way it worked out. So I kind of planned it. Okay, I'm only taking 13, 14 credits this semester, whereas in the past I was taking 17, 18. I'm just going to try to get it in. Get it in then. But yes, in retrospect, if I were giving advice to my past self, I would say tough it out, self-study biochem. That's another thing. I didn't, this is also when I finished all my biochem series.
Okay.
So hindsight, I would tell myself, self-study biochem, take it in January, study during the summer, even though that's going to suck, study in the summer, take it January if I could go back. Very
logical and very common reasons for a later MCAT and sometimes a lower MCAT as well. So, all right, moving on, we'll get into your activities and see what else you were doing during this time. So you can see kind of timeline here. You're working in this research lab, pretty good amount of hours as well. You have your fitness training, so you're exercising, having some hobbies during that time. You're having some paid employment during this time as well. So you're busy with lots of other things as well during this time. So that all adds up to just a lack of focus on maybe some of the more important things. Not to say that the MCAT's the most important thing, but it's an important part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So let's look at your activity descriptions and see where we go from here. So looking at your activity description, so research labs, one of the more boring ones. A lot of students are just like, here is what I studied. This enzyme does this, whatever. So if we look at your activity description, I'm trying something new today, trying to look at these activities with fresh eyes, coming at them, just kind of taking a peek for the first time and not pre-marking them up, to get some initial reactions. And one of the things that I see just starting off here is when I have action items, action writing right off the bat, I go, oh, this is exciting, right? Walking into the lab on my first day was exciting and nerve-wracking. I'm like, oh, what's going on? Like that's exciting. I want to keep reading. And then we have the goal of the project. So you do get into some of the nuts and bolts that students dryly talk about usually. So you talk about here, started first day off, preparing a few samples, blah, blah, blah. The data was finally in, exclamation point. I usually don't recommend exclamation points in writing. It works here, though. It's fine, right? It's not, a lot of people are like, oh, that's unprofessional. I'm like, it's not unprofessional. I just don't think it's needed. Another one there.
Yeah. You're going to find a lot of
we get a lot of them as I keep looking here. So you're just an excited person. That's okay. Your enthusiasm spilling over. And so, right, when you look at this, I rushed over to view my data, only to find straight lines indicating nothing. So failure, I love talking about failure as a research description because there are things to learn from that. There are ways that I can understand who you are, right? No idea what went wrong, blah, blah, blah. I will never forget to add the RNA ever again, right? Nice little lesson learned. It's funny. It's silly. All the research nerds would be like, oh, I've done that 300 times. I wish I learned from my first mistake. And so it's great, right? It shows me who you are. It's not some boring, dry thing that's like, I have no idea what you're talking about unless I was an expert in the same field. Whatever. All right. So great job there. Let me ask you, as you are going back through your interviews that you went on, feedback at all from interviewers about how they were able to connect with you, see who you were, all of that fun stuff.
I think one interviewer said they enjoyed reading the stories I had in my application. I didn't get any specific feedback on this RNA story. I did get asked about the research part of it, to expand upon the research part, because I didn't really get too much of what I did day to day, but that's about it from this section.
And that's I think an important thing is they can ask you more details during the interview, right? They go, ooh, this is interesting. I'm going to ask you more information as I bring you in. The details are usually not what is going to make or break an interview invitation. Like, oh, thank God we finally found someone who knows how to run an assay for this one specific kind of protein and understands the science behind it. Like, that's not what they're going for. They're just going for people to understand who they are, what they're doing. So great job there. So we get to hobbies, and you see total hours here. You're busy doing that, and you're like, okay, it's during the pandemic. You're under stress. How do you handle that stress, right? Med school is going to be stressful, and the admissions committee is going to be like, are these people going to understand how to handle the stress? And so you have a hobby here that specifically addresses that point of like, hey, I've been through a stressful situation, and you have socially distance, right? Socially distance, got to stay safe, fitness class, and you're going through immense physical activity, erased your stress. So now it's like, great. This person has coping mechanisms kind of built in already. Hopefully they'll be able to keep them going through the process. So great job there. And you notice here, one of the things that students love to do with activities and hobbies and fitness training like this is that being in fitness gave me the dedication I needed that I know I'm gonna need as a doctor, right? And it's just like, come on, just tell us something fun about weightlifting or fitness training, whatever. You don't need to tie it into medicine at all. So that was a good job.
Thank you.
All right, and then we get to some shadowing. So we always love to see shadowing, which is great. Not a ton of it, but obviously pandemic-wise, not a lot of opportunities, but you made the best of it. And then shadowing typically doesn't allow for a lot of great storytelling or anything else, so I wouldn't expect much. And just glancing at your activity here, I don't see much, which is fine. You're just kind of showing what you learned from it. It's about all you can do for shadowing. Moving on to public health ambassador, which is a great experience. I don't think public health is looked at enough for pre-med students as a kind of viable option, even as a physician getting into public health, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love right off the bat, a lot of people take my storytelling to the extreme, and I'll get through an experience description and I'll look at something like public health ambassador. I'm like, well, what is that? I don't know what that is, right? It's not an EMT. I know what an EMT does. Public health ambassador, what is that? What is your role? And right off the bat, you told me what that is, which is great. And it's a very common piece of feedback. I don't know if you give it as a TA in Application Academy. A very common piece of feedback when I'm reading an activity description is, I have no idea who you are in this. Like, there's too much story here. I don't know enough. And I think that's the storytelling to the extreme when people are like, but Dr. Gray says to tell stories.
It's a balance.
It is a balance. Yes. All right. So you have the kind of your role here, which is great. And then you kind of get into a story here. So hybrid learning semester, you saw a student walking with his shirt pulled above his nose. Yeah. Would he like some masks? He gladly accepted. Ran out of masks, blah, blah, blah. So just quick little story, nothing super amazing, impactful, oh my gosh, you saved the world, but just a cute little story to show kind of what your role was and how that impacted the larger community, obviously, specifically for public health. COVID-19 screener, obviously this new job that kind of popped up out of nowhere. Like, hey, COVID-19 screener, every pre-med has done it. Again, probably not a huge necessity. Like, as a COVID-19 screener, I did X, Y, and Z. Like, we all know what COVID-19 screeners do. We've interacted with them if we've been in the hospital in any way of like, have you had any fevers or chills or sniffles or been in contact with anyone with not HIV, with COVID, whatever, right? And so you get into this world and you're like, yeah, I don't need to explain specifically what I did because we all kind of know. Versus the ambassador one from before, we don't really know. And then again, a story, right? You got a little story here to show who you are, what you're doing, which is great. And I love the little reflection. Again, storytelling to the extreme is, I don't know who you are and I don't know why this was important to you. And so you have a little bit of reflection here to show its impact on you. How hard do you think it is, right? As you're a TA now for Application Academy, looking at students trying to cram in their activity and have a who am I and a little bit of story if one fits and a reflection in 700 characters, or for the ACOMAS application, 600 characters.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to do. And I think everyone definitely takes a different approach to it. I do see a lot of just storytelling. And if you just storytell in 600 characters, it's very hard to show who you are and what you got from it. So for the 600 character ones, I mean, I would even say like storytelling is like a little lower priority for that. Definitely want to get your reflection and get what you actually did and your role and your impact a little bit, even if it means you're not telling a story.
Awesome. All right. So good job there. Again, at the end of the day, my take on what the importance is, the goal of this process is, especially for this primary application, is I just want to see who you are. And this style of writing that you're putting forward, that we teach in Application Academy, that you help craft with being a TA as well, is like, just show me who you are. You don't need to sell yourself. You don't need to go overboard here. I just want to understand who you are, and that's what I love about it, because I can read this and go, I can picture who you are. I can see who you are. I can potentially see you as a fit on our campus or not, which is okay too.
A lot of the feedback I give, it sounds so corny every time I say it. It's just true. I say, like, speak from the heart. Like, if this is where your passion lies, then talk about it. And if it's not, then don't. Like, yeah. I don't know. It's a corny saying, but I think it's really true.
Yeah, it fits. Teaching, tutoring, teaching assistant. This is one, I don't know if you've seen it. I've seen it plenty of times where it's like, as a tutor, I have to adapt my learning style to each student's individual needs. I'm like, duh, like, that's the point. I don't need to know that. Tell me a story, and let's go from there. So you have here, you did it for a good amount of time, a couple semesters there, for a good amount of hours. The description here, so you mark this one as most meaningful, so you have both the experience description and most meaningful. And remember, just for everyone watching, this is 700 characters always for AMCAS, and then the most meaningful is a separate 1325 characters. And then on TMDSAS, you get 300, unfortunately, and you get 500. And then that's for TMDSAS. And then ACOMAS does not have a most meaningful activities designation, unfortunately. Maybe we'll get them to change that one day. Working on it. All right. So we get to your description. What do you think was for you kind of, okay, I'm marking this as most meaningful. I have two separate boxes here. What do I put in each? What's your kind of philosophy on that?
When deciding what I wanted to be my most meaningful, I just thought of what I enjoyed the most, and also what I wanted to carry with me in the future, I think. So teaching is something I'm really passionate about and something I want to continue in the future, something I like talking about. So I chose that. And then in the beginning, I'd say the first 7 characters, I kind of do more general. In this instance, I don't really think I followed that as well.
Okay.
But I just give an overview of like what my role looked like, or like something, basically what I did like in my day to day. And then the second most meaningful experience, I usually dove into a more specific story because I did have more characters and it is the most meaningful. So I think it's easier to tell a story about how that experience was most meaningful to me.
That makes sense. So you do have here, right? You have a passion for education. You hope to carry throughout your life, applying to maybe more academic medical schools that have big academic medical centers attached to them. They may like that because they're like, ooh, that's what the types of students that we want to train here. And if that's your truth, great, go for it. And then the schools that are like, oh, like, we don't need more academic physicians, we need more community physicians, they'll look at that and go, yeah, not a good fit for us because we don't have the resources or whatever here at our campus. Which again is okay. You're not going to please every single medical school that you submit an application to. You keep going here, right? You enjoyed working with a team of professors, so kind of playing into a little bit of the team player mentality there without going, I am a team player. You just kind of, again, show your passions throughout this. I love the kind of visual here, right? The students would trudge into your classroom half asleep and sit in silence until class began. So that was a nice little storytelling aspect there. And then, again, the reflection. Why was this important to you? Just in the 700 characters, a nice little impactful story just right there. And then you get into another story, right? A student named Colin and what that meant to you and to him, and telling his story and how you impacted this person, which is awesome. And again, reflection, right? Kind of impacting students through their journey. It's a great job. You have scholarship here, so not a ton to talk about with scholarship stuff, but you were able to tell a little bit of story here. A lot of times people with scholarships and different rewards will just kind of list things, which is perfectly fine. You took a little bit of a different angle of what kind of how this came about, which is perfectly fine. We have artistic endeavor here, and I always wonder, like, why does a student market artistic endeavor versus a hobby versus Here you talk about selling hair scarves versus marking it as a paid employment job.
It's something I kind of built from nothing. So I considered it a creative endeavor, an artistic endeavor, a business endeavor. It could have been really a whole handful of things, but it was definitely more than a hobby because it was something that I got income from. Yeah, it wasn't really a paid employment because I wasn't really employed by anyone. So I chose artistic endeavor.
It was lost on its own. You're like, it doesn't really fit any of these other buckets, so I'm going to call it this. Yeah. And there's no right or wrong, right? There's not like marking this. Someone's be like, this is not an artistic endeavor. This is paid employment, right? And nobody's going to get mad at how you marked it. Unless it's like you mark it as clinical and it's clearly not clinical. Like the example I always give is the student who marked being a janitor, which is an important part of the hospital staff. But he marked that as clinical experience because it was in the hospital. I'm like, no, sir, that is not how this works. But good try. Again, the backstory here is important. Who are you as a person? Understanding your motivations, all this stuff, and seeing that activity description here is a big part of that. So, right, you spent a lot of time learning to sew with one of your friends, your grandmother. Oh, how sweet. You made some hair scarves for your little sister. So I get a little bit of a story of your family here. And then you started selling them, and it was great. So you then use those resources to make cotton face masks for individuals. So great use of those resources for when we needed them. So great job there. And then we have another one here. Here's a question for you. You have 40 hours and 40 hours over, looks like the summers for a couple years. You mark this one as most meaningful. And I always get a little concerned. Such few hours marked as most meaningful. What was the thought process here?
In those 40 hours or 80 hours total, I would say that I felt this experience pull me towards medicine the most. Even though it was such a small amount of time, it was time when I was in the hospital for a period of time every week and really got to communicate with the doctors and meet a lot of patients. And to me, it was a formative, and it was something that I felt like I could really reflect on. And
that's the perfect answer, right? You didn't mark it as most meaningful because you thought you had to because it's medical, clinical, or whatever. You marked it as most meaningful because you reflected on it and said, yeah, this is most meaningful to me, which is perfect. You get into a little bit of a story right off the bat here, which is great. Again, the writing style is good because I can see what's going on. Poor pig bite. Are pigs' mouths dirty like dogs? No, dogs are clean. Humans are dirty.
I'd imagine pigs are gross. They eat like anything, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting. So you have this experience interacting with James here. Again, I love the quotes around patient names just to like let everyone know, like, hey, this is not a HIPAA violation. This is a pseudonym. We're all good here. And then one thing that's interesting here is a little bit of a continuation of the story. So you have James here at the beginning and then a little bit more James again, although you kind of use it more as a launching off point for this kind of community of people that you're serving. And so different than, I think, the last episode of Mission Accepted, I think, and I don't know how they come out, but the last episode, I think, at least that I recorded, where the student literally was a continuation. He basically used the 700 and 1325 as one giant 2,000 character essay. And I don't typically recommend doing that. Although for him, it worked. He got in. So that's okay. That just goes to show you I have no idea what I'm talking about, and anything works. Do whatever you want. Stop watching this. So again, nice little story here. And then a nice little reflection here, right? Exposure to this minority group, how important different cultures are, and just allows that reflection, allows the reviewer of this to go, okay, great, I understand why this is important to you. I see some important takeaways here. It's a good time if you do want to kind of promote a little bit, sell a little bit, to be like, hey, like I understand diversity is important and cultural kind of understanding is important, cultural competence is important. it fits here, right? So good job. You have Wilford Hall. That brings back memories. I've done some rotations. Good old Wilford Hall. So you've done some shadowing here. So now you have 3 different shadowing activities. One of the things I talk about is it potentially looks like you're padding your application when you have lots of especially little hours. Why keep these separate versus combining into one and just listing the different types of shadowing?
It was a combination of I had 2 extra spots. So I'm just going to do 2 separate shadowing things. And it's what one of the main feedback points I got from my academic advisor at Penn State was to at least try to give a little reflection, talk about the differences, at least try to give a little takeaway. Yeah. And I had the space, so I just did it.
As long as you weren't bumping out something else that could have showed me a little bit who you are, then yeah, I think that's okay. And again, the takeaways typically from shadowing aren't that great, and then just glancing at yours here, again, just super generic, what you kind of observed, and that's about it, right? That's about all you can do for shadowing. So then we get leadership, which is nice to see. A lot of time, kind of doing it for a long time here, and doing some club sport here, which is great. So again, a lot of opportunity here for leadership. Students will take the opportunity to highlight their strengths as a leader, as a team leader. And I understand that as a physician, you are the leader of the healthcare team and blah, 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 right? Students have that, like, this is my job to show you how I can be a leader. And I know that being a doctor, you're the leader of the healthcare team. And so here's my opportunity to shove it down your throat. All right. And you didn't take that opportunity, right? You just here's a little bit of story. Here's some stuff that happened. You use some numbers here, which I love to show impact. You have March 2019, 20 kids. It grew to now over 150 members, which is awesome. So showing that impact through numbers. And the club and how you got involved here, community service-wise, and who you're impacting, which is awesome. Vet assistant. Were you pre-vet before you were pre-med?
I was.
Yeah. All right. Love it. Love it. Lots of you out there going down that path. Was there any concern about putting vet stuff on your med school application?
I was a little bit, but I think this experience is kind of what made me think, medicine instead. So I was fine with putting it in because it led me to medicine.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's funny looking at vet assistant and seeing a C-section on the procedure line. I'm like, do animals have C-sections? I've never really thought of an animal having a C-section. I'm like, well, I guess so, maybe. Why not? It's funny. So again, good storytelling. Slipped my glove on, stood eagerly. I can picture this. You're eliciting emotions, which is great. And then all the puppies coming out and hearing some first squeaks, which is funny. So yeah, I guess dogs have C-sections just like humans, which is funny.
Only specific kinds, only specific breeds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, why? Just smaller hip bones in those breeds?
Yeah, I think so. You always saw the boxers. They did lots of boxers.
Interesting.
Or no, not boxers. The French bulldogs. That's what it is.
The French bulldogs, because they're so expensive. They're like, don't hurt my doggy. You must carefully take them out. Yeah, poor Frenchies. Awesome. How much did vet stuff come up in your interviews, if at all?
I don't think it came up at all.
A lot of students are scared that are like, well, if I bring up this other healthcare field, they're going to question if I truly want to be a doctor. I'm like, no, they'll just assume that you either changed your mind or it was the only thing that you found that you could do based on hours, whatever. And you're okay, right? As long as the rest of your application shows why you want to be a doctor, they're not going to grill you during your interviews, which is great. And then we get to one of your last ones here. Your last one, exactly, is paid employment, not medical clinical. Obviously something you did for a long time, even through the application process, and racked up a lot of hours. And again, I love that you don't have here that nobody told you, or maybe they did, and you ignored them. Like, why would you put barista as a most meaningful activity that has nothing to do with medicine? And I can't stand, like, I had a student once tell me that they went to an open house at a med school and were like, your three most meaningful should be one research, one clinical, and one shadowing. I'm like, no, like that completely removes like most meaningful to me as a person. So did you get any pushback from anyone marking this as most meaningful?
No, I don't think so.
Good. All right. And then you have here, right, during summer and over school breaks. And sometimes a lot of students will break that up into like just 4 or 5 different date sections here. You just listed it as one. I think that's perfectly fine. No issues with that. So you work at a coffee shop and you get to do all of these different things, which is great. You're interacting with the community, building relationships, right? You're showing parts of who you are both in this role, but obviously also kind of giving a nod to the future of like, I understand as a physician, there's a lot of community here and building relationships with patients and all that fun stuff. And you're able to do that through the storytelling, through just interacting with your role here, which is awesome. And so good story overall. Again, I get to see who you are, why this is important, and then good reflection here at the end, which is great. Love the writing. Obviously, I'll take Application Academy will take all credits for the writing, but it was great. Good job. So I get through your activity descriptions, and I go, awesome. You got clinical experience, shadowing. You have these interactions. You're good to go. And I just want to double check. I'm interested to know, you didn't mark vet assistant as clinical. Why not?
I guess when I thought clinical, I thought human medicine. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's a common thing. I probably would have marked it as clinical. I wouldn't have had an issue marking that as clinical. All right. And then we get to personal statement. We drilled it home a ton in Application Academy. Personal statement is, why do you want to be a doctor? And do you think at the end of this, you were like, yep, nailed it. This is my story. This is why I want to be a doctor?
Yeah, I think it was pretty, I tried to keep that goal in mind. I don't know. I guess it's easy to sometimes get off that trail, but I think at the end of it, my personal goal with it was I want them to know that I want to be a doctor, but that I want to be this kind of doctor, not like specialty kind of doctor, but yeah. I wanted the reader to kind of see the person I wanted to be as a physician in the future too. And
I remember kind of, because we do so much review in Application Academy, I remember kind of reading this over and over again and seeing how it played out. And it's interesting now seeing it all together. I'm like, well, is this really your seed? Because you told me earlier you wanted to be a vet. Why didn't you have vet stuff here as a seed versus the story that you did write about?
The vet thing was kind of hindsight. Okay. I think I kind of realized after all of this happened that, like I was kind of just doing the vet thing because I was interested in the medicine part, not really the animal part. And it was more of a hindsight realization, whereas this formative experience was what really made me take action.
As you're thinking about your journey, thinking about your truth, that's the story that you come up with, that works. As long as it makes sense to you as you're telling your story. All right, so we have this seed here. So you talked about why this is your seed and makes complete sense. And we get to kind of starting to water the seed, and you have a patient interaction, which is what we always talk about in terms of being able to water the seed. What actions did you take to go prove to yourself that this is what you want to do? And so you kind of make this transition. You are in a hospital now. You're meeting a patient, again, using quotes to say, hey, this is a pseudonym. And you are doing good scene setting here and really helping the reader just understand who you are, what your role is, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, all of this fun stuff. And so you have this connection here, right? Not capable of verbal communication, but body language allowed us to connect, which is great. And you focus here on what it was that kind of led you down this path, right? You're comforting her, you have this interaction, and you have this experience to want to be the one going the extra mile so that patients like her can have hope for a brighter future. So that's kind of your reflection of why this was important to you, why you're telling this story to the reader, and then you're moving on to another experience. So it's not just all story, you have that reflection as well. And then we come down into another story, another watering here, which is great. And you have Betty here hanging out and seeing open wounds swarming with maggots. That's a lovely visual. Anyone who's been in a hospital has seen really, really, really bad wounds that need some help. And so wound vacs are our friends. I want to know who came up with the idea. Let me throw a vacuum on that thing and see if it helps. Like, who's the first person that thinks like, I just don't know. Anyway, I love the science. It's so fun. So you have, again, this story here, these wounds, obviously diabetic neuropathy causes horrible, horrible wounds. And not the exact cause, but allows these wounds to kind of fester. And I love this human stress ball for Betty, right? Being there, allowing her to kind of get the stress off, and you kind of absorb it for her, which is great. So you're providing that emotional support as part of her care, which is wonderful. And again, why? Why is this important? So it motivates me to become a physician who supports patients by not only treating their tangible needs, but by being someone that they can lean on in times of emotional duress. Awesome reflection, a little bit forward looking, right? The type of physician that you want to be. I think that's perfectly fine. And then I love, I talk about it all the time, for the conclusions to be very aspirational, right? What do you hope to accomplish in terms of this process? And right off the bat, I can go, okay, great. I can see some aspiration here. I can see some of you trying to tell the person reading this, like, who are you and what do you want to accomplish in this world? And talking here, again, prioritize patients' mental well-being, tangible conditions, all this fun stuff. I have a good sense of why you're doing what you're doing, who you hope to be, the impact that you want to have on this journey. So great job with the personal statement. And then looking at school list, I think you're a Pennsylvania resident, correct, as you were applying? Yeah. So looking at school lists, you got Albany, which is private, Drexel's private in Pittsburgh. EVMS, I think, is public. I wish they would put public or private on these. Like, why? I always have to guess. Quinnipiac is private, Geisinger private, Katz. So all of these are private. Vermont is public. Rush is private, kidney. So you have public Colorado, Pittsburgh is private, and Washington, UW, is public. So only a couple public schools, mostly private. So great job with the school list. How did you go about picking schools to apply to?
Basically the public-private aspect of it. I really used the MSAR, I think is what's called, and looked at the percent of people they take from out of state, and use that to try to be realistic with what schools I had a shot at being a PA resident. But yeah, I personally don't love this school list. In hindsight, I know a couple of these schools had an MCAT minimum, and I just threw $100 at them without knowing that. And so I should have been a little bit more meticulous in that aspect. But
so looking at the application, again, I think it leads to definitely why you were successful through this process, with just good storytelling, good ideas of the process, at least from our point of view, of letting the reader understand who you are, understand the journey that you've been on, and not just hey, I'm smart enough, hey, I'm dedicated enough, hey, I know I want to be a doctor, you should accept me, and here are all the skills that I have, right? So just understanding. And I think that is what leads to having 9 interview invitations, even with similar stats to other students. They're not getting 9 interview invitations. So there's something in your application that someone's reading this going, I really like this student. I want to talk to them a little bit more. And I think that's what happened there. So great job. Any final parting words of wisdom besides everyone should go sign up for Application Academy?
Honestly, yeah, everyone should do application academy. Yeah, it just it takes the weight off of yourself a little bit in a way. But parting words. I would say again, like I said earlier, it's corny, but be true to yourself when you're writing. I think it's easy to read an application and say, yeah, this is not legit. This is like ingenuine.
Yeah.
People can tell if you're not being honest. I would keep that in mind. Start early. Time, it takes way more time than you think it's going to take. So yeah, I would say that too.